I'm Dan Hamilton, host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. Today's conversation on military spouse entrepreneurship is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and our staff at the Texas Veterans Land Board and Hiring Our Heroes. It is episode 2 of a 3-part series, and today I am joined by Meredith Lozar. She is a director of military spouse programs at Hiring Our Heroes, as well as Tara Dixon, the CEO of Research and Evaluation Group. And I'm so excited to have this conversation today. But before we do, I want to say thanks for your service to the country and your family service in the armed forces. Before we get started, I know you all have spent a long time in the military and your families have as well. And that's incredibly important. And so I'm excited to bring out some of the anecdotal evidence that you guys have experienced during your service to the military and your family's service to the military. And another thing too, this was a show that we started with the intention of talking about veterans affairs, about the military transition, and Hiring Our Heroes has done a really great job of bringing to the forefront the issues facing military spouse employment in military spouse entrepreneurship. And that's what we have an opportunity to talk about today. So I'm going to start off with you, Meredith. Can you provide us kind of a 30,000 foot view of maybe some of the lessons learned from the white paper that was put out by Hiring Our Heroes, as well as maybe some of the programs and resources that are offered by Hiring Our Heroes? And then Tara, if you don't mind kind of jumping in there on the tail end, maybe to discuss some of the lessons learned and maybe the ups and downs of running a business.
Dan, you hit on it. This year, we launched the Military Spouse Career Journeys Study, and it was an 18-month study in which we surveyed over 1,500 military spouses and also conducted 3 different focus groups across the country, sampling spouses from every single branch of service to include Reserve and National Guard to really get that picture of their employment experience. But we focused on 3 specific journeys, one of which we'll spend our time talking about today, and that's entrepreneurship. And the other 2 were remote work and upskilling, which are also very timely just because of the results of COVID-19 and what we're all seeing with the shift to remote work, talking today in our houses. So we all know how that's gone. But when we looked at entrepreneurship specifically in this study, we found a couple of really interesting things. And the most interesting that kind of came to the forefront for us was that military spouse entrepreneurs struggle most with portability, not profitability, which was a huge difference from their civilian counterparts. What we typically see is that a civilian small business will fail because of profitability. But military spouses told us, no, that's not the reason that I closed my doors or stopped being self-employed. It was a portability issue. And I think for a population that moves 10 times more frequently than their civilian counterparts, that's something we really need to pay attention to, because in order for us to make entrepreneurship successful for military spouses, we have to support that portability piece. And some other things that really came to light as we looked at military spouse entrepreneurship were the reasons that military spouses started their own business. And that was really interesting to us as well, because typically you'll see an entrepreneur start a business because they have a phenomenal idea or a passion for something. But what we found for military spouses was, yes, of course, they had enthusiasm around their idea and they really loved maybe their field, but they needed flexibility and they didn't have job options. They were really facing that 24% unemployment rate that has plagued us for the last decade. And, now as a result of COVID, we're tracking early results of 32% unemployment. So we are not going to see that needle move in a positive way for a little while. So it's really interesting to hear spouses tell us, no, I started my own business because I didn't really have any other options, or there weren't any options that fit our family. And the third thing I'll share that's just really focused on the entrepreneurship piece is we found that military spouses didn't know about all of the startup capital options that were available to them, and that nearly 50% of them were going into credit card debt to start their own business or drawing on their own savings. Whereas what you'll see a lot of times for civilian counterparts is that they will take out a small business loan or use a lending opportunity, or even crowdfunding. There's so many different options. And military spouses were just very quick to draw on their own accounts. So there seemed to be maybe a lack of information passed there. And I think that's something as a community we can come together to overcome.
Yeah, and so Tara, is there anything from those overall macro themes that you're able to touch on or have experience with?
Well, definitely. I have to agree with the survey results that Meredith spoke about, that portability and flexibility. Definitely, as a military spouse, as an entrepreneur, has been a challenge. And so trying to navigate through those two issues has been a challenge, but we've had to figure out how to overcome that. So that has been definitely something that is a lesson learned, and we're continuing to learn that on how to, every time we pick up and move, how do we keep the clients that we have in another state, another country, across the world. So it's been, that's definitely something that military spouses have to kind of have the discussion about and figure out how we can overcome that challenge.
So have you been able to, find best practices over the years as you have moved around?
I have. I have to say that there's always three things that I always do every time I know that we are moving, or once we get where our new base. I always reach out to some type of spouses network. I try and find out what is going on in the community that I'm about to live in. And I connect with the women or the men that I know already, because we've been in for a couple of years. The military is small, and my husband is Air Force, and the Air Force is even smaller. So there's somebody that knows somebody that's at a base that we are about to go to. And so I connect with them and I ask them, do you know any childcare options? Because we have kids, and we both, my husband and I obviously both work. So childcare options are always something I speak to someone about. Schools, I want to know where the best locations are for what's best for my family and my kids. And also I connect with a church organization, a religious organization that I feel that I can connect with. And if I have questions additional to, I know that if I can't find childcare, I can probably lean into my religious organization and connect with them and say, can you watch my child for a minute? I have a 2-hour meeting that I didn't plan for. And then I've always also tried to find my own personal group. I'm a runner, and so I find a running group. So that's my outlet. So I allow that opportunity to get outside of work, outside of parenting, outside of just military life in general, and connect with a running group that we can just do something fun and kind of get my mental health in check if I need to. So those are the top 3 things that I always do, no matter where we're going. I definitely reach out and try and connect.
And Meredith, does that sound like, similar conversations that you're having with other military spouses in terms of their experience or maybe resources that they're looking for?
Yeah. And one of the things that was really interesting, Tara, as you talk about that is, our research showed us that 70% of spouses feel overwhelmed when they go to look for resources. And I know as a Marine Corps spouse, this is our 10th duty station in 15 years. And so we have just moved so many times, and it is overwhelming when you get to a new location. Sometimes you're overwhelmed by the number of resources, and sometimes you're almost underwhelmed by the remote location where you are and how little is available to you. But it was really interesting in this study because I think, Tara, what we're seeing in our own population is a little bit of people who actually just are deer in headlights when they go to start looking for the next step in their entrepreneur journey, or they go to start looking for employment or education. And it's this sea of goodwill, which I think is fantastic. But at the same time, people told us they gave up. People told us that there was so much that they just pushed pause because they couldn't figure out the right direction. So actually, it's so interesting to hear you say that these are like your few tried and true things, because maybe if we can work with our population to sort of say, okay, zero in on your top 3, we could kind of overcome some of that resource confusion.
And Tara, I'm kind of interested to know, as somebody who's in a leadership position as the CEO of Research and Evaluation Group, one, if you can tell us a little bit about the business, and then two, if you can talk about being a leader as a CEO and working remotely, what that's been like for you.
Yes. So Research and Evaluation Group is a professional service consulting company. We provide services mostly within the public health sector, although outside of that, we provide services such as within the education field and workforce development. And so we are evaluating programs that either the federal government, state and local, and nonprofit organizations implement. So a lot of the work that we do can be done remotely. We actually started out kind of on the ground in a nonprofit. So we were in front of the nonprofit consistently doing site visits and doing surveys and data collection on the ground. Obviously, we're in COVID now, so we have to figure out how to do that differently. But that was 11 years ago where it was okay to do something like that in person. But as the business grew and we hired employees as well, we learned that a lot of the work that we do can be done virtually. We figured out how to conduct focus groups virtually. There was not a lot of literature on that, but we figured out how to do it, how to collect data virtually through surveys. There is still some hiccups on how to do it and get the right response rates that we want if we're not in person in front of people asking them those questions. So we're still working through some of those. And I think that's always going to be some issues that we deal with as a company. But for the most part, we've learned how to transition into a virtual world. At the same instance, I obviously moving all the time. I had to find people that I trusted to work in my organization, that understood that if I wasn't there, the work still had to get done. And this is the wonderful thing about military spouses, that they understand that because their husbands or wives may not always be there, but they still have to run their life, their household. And so having employees that understand that maybe the CEO or the C-suite isn't right there, that the work still can get done, has been probably one of the good things that we've learned, who to hire, the right people. Living overseas, obviously, and then having a lot of clients stateside, we've hired the right people that are on the ground and that know how to communicate virtually. That was another thing that we had to make sure that we figured out when hiring people or working with other organizations, that we have to learn how to communicate across different time zones. And sometimes you're up in the middle of the night and sometimes you're up at 5 a.m. To get the work done. But that means you might have to take a nap at noon or, so that's fine. But you have to kind of be versatile. So finding those people that are flexible. And that goes back to what Meredith said, that flexibility. And I think military spouses are very flexible because they have to be. And so they have that trait naturally. If they've been in for a little while, they know how to be flexible. So it's been, that's definitely one thing that we have tried to incorporate into our organization to continue that longevity of the community, of the company, to just be flexible and kind of make it work. We don't have to be there, but we can do it virtually and we can get the work done.
So Tara, I'll ask you this, and Meredith, if you can follow on. I know you talked about maybe some of the traits that military spouse entrepreneurs have naturally, which is one of them is flexibility. In the Marine Corps, we always use the term, Meredith may be familiar with, adapt and overcome, right? It's that inherent ability to do the job regardless of what the circumstances are. But let's say there's a young military spouse, they've been in for 4 years or 2 years or whatever it may be, and they can't find employment, and now they're starting to think about building a job or building a company or approaching the entrepreneurship realm. Let's say they've kind of caught the bug. Tara, first to you, What's your advice to them? And then Meredith, if you can follow up on that.
My number one advice would be tap into your resources. There are so many resources just for those that want to start a small business. And this is outside of the military, SBA, your chamber, wherever you are located. So tap into those resources and then go into, if you are a military spouse, find your entrepreneurial military spouses. There are somewhere, wherever you are, there's at least you can find 2 or 3 that have done it or are doing it, and connect with them and get their lessons learned, understand what they're doing and how they're making it work. And so connect with your local spousal network and find out how you can pursue your dream.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, I think the resources, absolutely. And the other piece that I would say is that networking piece is so huge, and you're not alone. And the network is amazing to provide you support and growth and that professional development, but also to connect you with local businesses that you can either partner with, that you can maybe sell your services to, depending on what it is that your business is. The network is amazing. But I think the hard piece about that for military spouses is every time we move, we lose our network and we have to rebuild a network. And so that's where things like the Military Spouse Professional Network or some of the Rosie Network chapters really come into play, because those are things that you can count on when you move to the next duty station, to have that replicable network you can drop yourself into and know that it will help you rebuild much, much faster. So that piece is, I think, really important.
I know that Tara mentioned this briefly there. She talked about the few things, the checklist almost, right, that she has when she gets to a new duty station. And I wanted to ask you, Meredith, if that's something that sounds familiar to you, and maybe if y'all can both talk about other best practices when getting to a new duty station.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. And, Tara hit on some that I think many of us do, and that's we look for a religious organization. We find a church that has maybe a good youth program that we can make sure that our kids can get plugged into, because sometimes that's an extended family for you. So I think that's something that I always look for. And the other thing that I look for is the piece of Meredith that needs to be found in the local community. So for Tara, it's her running group. For me, it's a CrossFit box that I'm going to join. And I think that piece we're seeing is so important, because this year we're actually diving into work and well-being for military spouses, and that really important connection. So we need to take care of ourselves. That is just a critical spot for military spouses. So I would say that's another one. And the third one is get plugged into your unit. Get plugged into your battalion, your squadron, whatever it is, because that will be your other family where you are. And that's who's going to help you through the deployments and the separations and the long days and nights. And to Tara's point earlier, as we look at kids, mine are running around the house, that's also who helps you in a pinch, when you need to be able to attend that meeting. So those are the top 3 things for me. I would say unit, faith, and also that personal item.
Yeah.
Is there an industry, and both of you can talk about this, is there an industry that military spouses favor, or an idea, or, is there kind of a hot commodity, maybe I'm talking about, and I would guess that because we're in a remote environment, a lot of the businesses that are created actually have to be online companies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, currently.
Because you can't, I would guess for military spouse entrepreneurs, they're not able to necessarily set up a storefront or, have that physical office space. Tara, are you able to maybe speak to that at all?
So I don't know if there's a hot, this is something that military spouses kind of gear towards, because I've seen so many different types of businesses. I've seen graphic designers to selling nail polish. So it's so different across. They've found their niche, and they found that what they're good at, and they've pursued it. So I think it really is important, if someone is listening to this and is a military spouse and says, I just want to do something. What are you doing right now? watching kids, then that could be your business. I mean, it's what are you doing, and then what do you enjoy? I think there still needs to be that enjoyment piece. It's not always enjoyable. It's not, but you need to at least have fun doing it at certain points of your career. But I want to talk about especially the volunteer piece. I think you can think about that. So what have you volunteered? Maybe not even now as an adult, but what did you do as a child that you enjoyed doing? Were you part of 4-H or, Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts? What were you part of that you can translate that into some type of business or entrepreneurial pursuit?
So after doing this for 5 or 10 years, I'm guessing you still do enjoy it, huh? It's still fun.
There are days that I have had that I've said, I'm just, why am I doing this? But I have a great support system. The employees that work for me, as well as my husband, reminds me why I do this. But I mean, I will say there have been days that it's been stressful, especially challenging with different time zones. I'm tired sometimes, and I just want to go to sleep, but it doesn't always happen. But we get the work done, and then I get, like I said, a nap at noon, and then I'm ready to go again. So,
Meredith, can you tell us about the Military Spouse Entrepreneurship Summit that Hiring Our Heroes hosted, and kind of what that process was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. The summit was something we did in partnership with the SBA late over the summer. And, it was really, really well attended. We had 1,000 spouses on the line, and that was just a fantastic turn for us, which I think really speaks to the virtual environment. And it was so nice to have people from around the globe really join us for that content. And we talked about anything from having an emergency plan or a disaster preparedness plan, because I think one of the things we learned this year specifically was that we weren't necessarily prepared. And how could you be prepared for something like COVID? I think that, is just incredibly difficult to really wrap your mind around. But we talked a lot about that. We talked about access to capital. We talked about just starting out with a basic business plan. We talked about something that Tara hit on just a few minutes ago, which was no matter where you are, there's a chamber you can plug into or an SBA resource at your fingertips, because there really are just a plethora of options, and had so many great questions around that. We also talked about how things like Boots to Business is available for military spouses too. And it's not just a resource for veterans, because I think so many times as spouses, we think, well, that's not an option for us. But little do we know that we actually do qualify for a lot of that programming. And we also really plugged people into other resources that are available no matter where they are in their entrepreneurship journey. So are you in the beginning? Are you a little further down the line and need mentorship on something very specific? So it was wonderful to really get that conversation started and spend some time highlighting some success stories along the way.
Yeah, I was also interested too. I know, there's the entrepreneurship piece, but there's also the employment piece. And I want to park there for a minute. If you can talk about the meaning of having a job, because these spouses, they want to work, they want to find work, but the barrier to entry, or maybe the barrier to a long-term career, is the transition from place to place to place. Can you maybe provide us the mindset of a spouse who is like, man, I want to go work, but I feel like this could be temporary? When they're either looking for jobs, if they're on LinkedIn or if they're on Indeed or whatever it may be, what's kind of the mindset of the military spouse who's looking to find a job and, trying to get plugged in that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think right now the mindset is different than it once was. So I will say that typically military spouses would be looking for that remote opportunity that they can carry with them from duty station to duty station. But what we had seen was that only 2 out of 10 military spouses had ever found it. So we're looking for roles that we can take with us, but yet we end up in a brick and mortar position, most likely, that we know we won't be able to take to the next duty station. So the mindset of the spouse is going to be, I'm highly educated, I'm highly skilled, I am dedicated. I am going to get into this job and knock it out of the park for the next 2 to 3 years and make as much progress as I can, because I know that on the other end, if I stand a chance of convincing them to let me keep my job, I need to do my best. And if I don't, then I need to know I've given it my all and move on to something else. And one of the things that's been wonderful about the world right now is, as we look at millennials in the workforce, they've done something for military spouses that had not been done before. And that's that they've leveled the playing field. Because what we've found is that millennials are not staying with a job longer than 2 to 2.5 years. And so what was once a challenge for military spouses being overlooked because they would not be retainable, they wouldn't, be a longevity resource for the organization, is now no longer an issue. So that has been helpful. And then as we look at, I think, the mindset of a spouse now, it's actually really a bright spot, because they know that they stand a better chance of securing a remote role. We've proven that we can do it as a business and industry. We can actually have everyone go remote. But the other piece of it is, how am I going to balance this against the childcare needs I have right now, the flexibility that I need right now? So the sad part of it, Dan, is that we have started to see spouses drop out of the workforce or delay their workforce goals as a result of what we're facing as a country right now.
Interesting. Tara, if I can kind of pivot to maybe some of the, not just the lessons you've learned, but I wanted to know if you learned from other executives who are working remotely, or if there are some people that you've been looking up to for mentorship, not just the past maybe 5 or 6 months, but maybe even beyond that, whether that's in your circle or at kind of at a national realm.
Yeah, so I have connected with some great women entrepreneurs as I've been through my career path. It started out that I just reached out to, I started with the SBA and reached out to find women-owned businesses and connected with them to find other women that were doing the same thing I was. And at that time, we weren't stationed at a actual base, so I couldn't connect with military spouses that were entrepreneurs, but I could connect with women that were entrepreneurs and had understood the same challenges that I would potentially face as I grew my business. And so I have continued that relationship with a lot of my mentors, and that they have been successful. They're retired now and were able to continue their business. And they did move their business a couple of times. So that's been a conversation that I've had with them. But also I have connected with those that are in the process of wanting to build a business as a spouse, and figuring out how I can kind of provide them the information, the lessons I've learned. I feel like I don't know that much, but what I do know, I can share. And so I have also connected with them, and I've learned from them because the world changes it's fluid. So I mean, 10, 11 years ago when I started, it was a little bit different. And so what they're telling me now are things that I can put into my business and learn from as I continue to grow this business that we have. So it's been a interesting transition of kind of connecting to those that are new at this, but still learning how to gather information from them as I kind of pour into them and provide them with information.
So I have to actually ask you, I know that your business, it started out in Atlanta, if I'm correct. And then you started commuting back and forth from your duty station to go down to the office and meet with clients and try to run the business in person. But are you comfortable working remotely? Are you excited to continue to do this? Or do you hope one day that you can get back in the office, that you can get back to Georgia, see people face to face? Is that something that you miss, or are you comfortable kind of working in the remote environment?
I miss my employees. The clients are great. I can't say that I don't miss them, but I miss that interaction with the employees and us having those one-on-one discussions or group of discussions. So we could be talking about a project with one employee that's working on that project, and another one walks in and just dumps some valuable information. And that doesn't happen in the virtual world. And so we are definitely missing that interaction, those little nuggets of information that we can share by being in person. But the virtual world has been actually a really good experience for us as a company, because some of the things that were potentially required to be in person are now we've figured out how to do virtually, or even our clients have accepted it as being virtual. And so we probably don't ever have to transition back to being in person. And they realize that the work is still getting done. Expectations are being met or exceeded. So it didn't hinder the deliverables or their final expectations. So with that, I have to say, I actually think that COVID has been a wonderful experience, at least for us as a virtual company at this point. But we do miss that interaction. And so I am excited that once things kind of calm down, we can all get back in the office and just have a huddle time. Well, what we have done because of this virtual world is we have a meeting at the end of the week at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays every single week. And we check in and we say, we can talk about work, but we can also say that my dog had to go to the vet and I needed to, I wasn't able to finish work on this project, or my kid was sick this week. And how are you all dealing with that? So we created that community virtually because we know we needed it, even though we're kind of all in different time zones and dealing with different projects. So.
No, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because one of kind of the macro themes that I think has been brought out over the last 6 months is how do you maintain that culture if you don't have the relationships, or if you don't even have, an advisor or manager walking around ensuring deadlines are being met, and some of just the, like you said, the relationships that are built in an office, or just, ideas that pop into your head. And so Meredith, I know that, the virtual summit went really well, but I was also interested too. And maybe this has actually opened up some doors for you to be able to connect with people around the world and different folks that you may not have been, but interested to know what the experience has been like for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, the experience for us in the beginning was kind of eye-opening, because at the Chamber, we're conveners and we bring people together. I mean, that is just what we're about. And so looking at shifting everything we do, which is a very heavy event schedule, anywhere from 50 plus events a year, to a virtual environment, felt like a really heavy lift. But I was so proud of our team because we pivoted within just a few weeks. And I think the results of that have been amazing. We didn't say it here, but I am at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma in the middle of Arizona. And for me, the next biggest town is 2.5 hours away. And that's not unusual for our spouses who might be in Fort Polk or 29 Palms. And they may never see an event come to their installation that they can attend and benefit from. So when we went virtual, we all of a sudden had sold out career intensives and wait lists, and people from Korea calling in to join us, and Japan, like you, Tara, where we have been before too, just to be able to get that information and be a part of that event. So the virtual footprint for us will remain. We will go back to in-person when we can, but we will never lose that part, because we have been able to reach spouses who I think oftentimes felt isolated and unreachable.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate y'all bringing out kind of the macro discussion, and also what the day-to-day like has been in your lives, and as well as your family's lives as you continue to serve the country. Meredith, is there anything that we didn't get to hit on today that you would like to leave the audience with?
Gosh, I mean, we got to talk about so many great things. I think for entrepreneurs and just military spouses in general, I would say visit milspouseroadmap.org. We talked today about the resources and your journey. And as you need help along the way, it is a fantastic map for you.
Awesome. Thank you for being with us, Meredith, today. I appreciate all of your insight and the hard work that y'all are doing to provide services for military spouses. And then Tara, I wanted to turn to you as well today. Is there anything that you would like to bring up that maybe you didn't get to hit on?
I think just an encouraging piece to those listening to this and are thinking about pursuing an entrepreneurship track, or even are currently in it, just know that you are not alone. Wherever you are, find your tribe. connect with them, and there's someone that is willing to help and can give you some past experience on what they've learned. And then also know that you have some value to add. Even if you've just gotten into the military life and experience, your past experiences can add some type of value to someone else that's been in for 20 something years. So just know that you add value to whatever you're pursuing.
No, that's excellent. It's great advice. It's great encouragement. And I think you guys have really kind of laid the groundwork for what the challenges are, but also what the solutions are and where the resources are for military spouses to be able to take advantage of that. And again, I want to thank you for being on the program with us today. I appreciate all y'all's hard work. And what always keeps me motivated and what always makes me feel encouraged during these conversations is people like yourself who are solutions minded. And not only are you trying to make it work for yourself, but you're also using your time and resources to look out for the people and those in the armed forces who are around you. Thank you for being on the program with us today.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and our partners at the Hiring Our Heroes, thank you for joining us once again. This has been episode 2 of our 3-part series. We can't wait for our conversation next week with Medal of Honor winner Dakota Meyer. Meet us back here on Monday. Thank you for joining.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.